Namaste again. Today I thought I'll pick up a subject matter which is not easy to understand and assimilate, and most importantly, as preserve and retain, is a chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita. There are a few verses in that chapter which we call as values or jnana. But again, remember, these values are not the knowledge of the self or the Atman, which is both the means and end of Vedantic teaching. But when these values are understood, fully assimilated, and regularly practiced in our daily life, the individual does indeed get ready to receive that unique wisdom of Atma-Jnana. So basically, it's called conditioning before you get the ultimate success. I plan to detail about 20 critical values detailed by Lord Sri Krishna in the coming academic year, so that regular listeners would indeed get ready to receive the Atma-Jnana. As a matter of fact, if you listen to Professor Bell over the last 5 weeks, he used the word bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is an individual who is on the path of enlightenment, not who was already Buddha, but bodhisattva is on the path of enlightenment. So each one of us who is joining us discussing this morning is a bodhisattva. Before we embark on this formidable task, I would like to bring all of us up to date as to how we arrived at this 13th chapter of Gita, which I mentioned to you as earlier, very challenging to discuss without a proper background. The subject of Kshetra, Kshetratna Yoga, the nature of the knower and the entity to be known. Now remember, having completed the studies about your true nature, Tvam, in the first 6 chapters, and giving us understanding of the grandeur and the qualities of God, learning how to become knowledgeable devotee who literally becomes none other than God in the 12th chapter. And that those 6 chapters we're talking about Tat. Starting in 13th chapter, we are closing that loop to fully realize Tat Tvam Asi. So Asi is the one who's closing the loop part of it. That's an exciting subject to discuss, and that's why I thought I'll give it a try again. So Tat Tvam Asi, if you remember Shankaracharya talking, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. Our Vedas are brilliant because not only they elaborate the same subject matter of Atman and Brahman, but also periodically give us some emphatic statements which keeps us awake, gives us a jolt to understand. These are known as famous word called Mahavakyas, but I'll divide them into 4 different subsegments. There's one which is called, a few of them, of course, but that we refer all that is Upadesha Vakya. That means advice or commentary made by the teacher, telling what you're supposed to head towards. And there he is talking about Tat Tvam Asi. That comes in Chandogya Upanishad, section 8, verse 6, a couple of other references are there. So Tat Tvam Asi comes from Chandogya Upanishad, from Samaved. Again, as I have mentioned, Shankaracharya talking in Vivek Chudamani, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. There is no difference between Atman and Brahman. Having talked about Upadesha Vakya, advice of the teacher, somewhere down the road in Vedas, they talk about definition called Lakshmana Vakya. There's a statement called, person now will know it in the tip of his tongue, Pradnyanam Brahma. Consciousness, awareness is Brahman. Definition. Aitareya Upanishad, chapter 3. The next one is called Anubhava Vakya. Statement from the very first experience. This is specifically for you, Prasanna. Then you'll come to understand it. As I've discussed it a few times before, but I'll repeat it again. It only comes through the living teacher, because even though we talk about Sadashiva Samarambhat, Shankaracharya Madhyamam, Asmat Acharya Paryantam, Vande Guru Paramparam, starting with God himself, Sadashiva. In between was the inspiring teachers like Shankaracharya, who brought back Hinduism to power and spread amongst the people in the community. But it is interspersed with enlightened chain of teachers, traditional teachers. So you only can get that from a person who's alive. So what happens is, an enlightened teacher is teaching you, watching your progress, and only when he is satisfied that you have understood and assimilated the wisdom in the Vedas in your daily practice, because you stay in Gurukul, watch him, or he observes your performance in day-to-day activities. And at that time, the Guru is pleased. He recognizes that you have mastered the Shastras, so he realizes you got Shastra Group. Having seen that you're doing that in day-to-day life, Guru is really pleased. At that time, Guru Krupa comes. But since Guru is coming in the lineage of Sadashiva himself, through him, he passes on the Deva Krupa. This is where happens the change, Prasanna. At that time, the individual changes dramatically. Just like the change of caterpillar turning into a butterfly, never to come back to the original status. So that's called Anubhava Vakya. The first time he is able to experience the Atman within. So when that blessing is given by Guru, pass on the grace of God through Guru, having recognized that you have mastered the knowledge in Shastras, that blessings allows you, when you in meditation in a quiet place, to experience it. And that's called Anubhava. That is Anubhava Vakya. And that is called Atma Krupa. So here, the statement of a person who experiences the first time, he says, Ayam Atma Brahma. By George, I got it. Ayam Atma Brahma. It happens in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad a couple of times. So we talked about Upadesh Vakya, we talked about Lakshmana Vakya, and Anubhava Vakya. And the fourth is, when a person is enlightened and continues his life to complete his prarabdha, like Ramakrishna did, he lives in a state of enlightenment called Jivan Mukta, we call it. Some branches of Hinduism don't accept it, but we, Shankaracharya's followers, we accept it. Where that's called Anusandhana Vakya, statement of having lived it constantly in your life. At that time, you have conquered the death because you know what the death is. And that particular person is saying, Aham Brahmasmi. So, Tattvamasi, Pradnyanam Brahma, Ayam Atma Brahma, and Aham Brahmasmi. So these are the four basic key important statements to be remembered. Now, let's go back one more time where we talked about the first 6 chapters. I'm sure Naina wants to learn more about it again. Here we discuss Tvam. We try to learn about what is Atma is. We talked about Nitya, eternal, Ajam, unborn, Avyayam, not subject to any change, Shashvata, ever present, does not get destroyed when the body is cremated. In 20th verse, he says, Ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. We learned that. He continued, Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavaka, nachainam kledayantyapo, na shoshayati maruta. This self or Atman cannot be chopped or killed by weapons. It cannot be burned by fire. It can't be drowned or covered up by water or blown away by the winds. He continued, Achedyo yamadayoyam, akledyo shosheyevacha, nitya sarvagatasthanu, achaloyam sanatana. The soul cannot be burnt or divided, dissolved or dried up. Soul is eternal, all-pervading, unalterable, unmovable, and ever-present Sanatana. Is there. There is no beginning, there is no end, because eternal, like our Sanatana Dharma. Of course, the second chapter was the whole story. But of course, Arjuna had questions over and over again. So he went on through Karma Yoga, Karma Phala Sannyasa Yoga, even Raja Yoga, where he tried to explain to him that since he was married, even though both paths of sannyas as well as karma were available, since he was married, he had to follow a path of a samsari as a karma yogi. But again, he told that whatever the karma you do, you can still become sannyasi by giving karma phala sannyas, not accepting the results of your actions. And subsequently taught him Raja Yoga, how he can advance himself, recharge himself, re-energize himself through meditation in the 6th chapter. During the discussions, if you remember, Shri Krishna is saying, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavahanam avyam vivasman manave prahu manuruksha kave bravit. Of course, Arjuna got confused. He said, wait a minute, you are same age as I am. What are you talking about? You taught it to Vivasvat. So Arjuna, he tells Arjuna, hey Arjuna, listen to me. Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava chajuna. I lived many lives, you have lived many lives. Tanyam sarva vedani tattvam natvam chet parada. I remember them all. But Arjuna, you just don't. But again, he also immediately gave an assurance that even if the things don't go well in this society, in this world, I won't abandon you. He said, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmanam sujamyam. Anytime something goes wrong and the help is needed, I'll be here to help you. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. What is exciting is at the end of the first part, Tvam, as you can see, Arjuna was baffled, as we get in the medical school where they throw so much of material at you to learn and expect you to know. The professors know. You don't know as much, but over a period of time you learn, but it has to be thrown to them. He gave them an assurance is, even if you felt that you didn't quite fully absorb what I have taught you so far, nothing is going to be wasted. You can come back again and re-study it and complete your work. Purvabhyasena teneva riyate yavashopya jidnyasu api yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. In the 43rd and 44th verse of the 6th chapter, it says, when you come back, tatra tam buddhi sanyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatato chatato bhuya samsiddho gurudana. So even if you don't finish your homework tonight, you can get up in the morning like a rebirth and complete your work. So nothing gets wasted. Do the best as you can. If you complete it, so be it. If you don't complete it, you can come back and finish the last, get the last credit to complete it. Now comes the second part of the whole story, 7 through the 12th. In the 7th chapter, Jnana Vijnana Yoga, he talks about knowledge, self-knowledge, and path towards enlightenment. The person who studies it carefully and pursues it comes to understand and live Vasudeva Sarvamiti. And he says, Sa Mahatma Su Durlabha. Sri Krishna himself recognizes that it's not easy, but takes time. But the good teacher keeps on hammering the same thing. And sometimes boring to the students, why the professor is repeating over and over again. But that's the sign of a good teacher. He keeps on hammering till the time ultimately it sticks in the student's mind. There was the 7th chapter. In the 8th chapter, he talked about Akshara Brahma Yoga. Kim Tat Brahma, Kim Adhyatmam, Kim Cha Purushottama. Please explain what is Brahman, what is Atman. He of course says, Aksharam Param Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatma Chate Bhuta Bhavo Karo Nisarga Karma Samstita. Basically, he tried to explain to him. In the 9th chapter, he went on to Raja Vidya, Rajaguya Yoga. And he continued through the 10th chapter talking about the Gurus of Bhagavan, basically to make us understand that if you have good qualities with you, they are the manifestation of divinity within you. The credit does not belong to you. In the 10th chapter, 11th chapter, he talked about Vishwarupa Darshan Yoga, where you give the cosmic form. In the 12th chapter, he talked about Bhakti Yoga, talks about Upasana. And in 13 to 19 verses, as all of you know, he gives 39 qualities of an enlightened Bhakta. So it becomes Jnani Bhakta. And really speaking, Jnani Bhakta, enlightened Bhakta, is equal to Ishvara. There's no difference whatsoever. And that finally brings us to the third part, the third over we want in cricket, 6 balls. It's called Closing the Loop between 13th to the 18th chapter. Now, what is funny is, the first verse which I'm going to say, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, Kshetram Kshetratyameva Cha, Etat Veditum Ichchami, Jnanam Nyayam Cha Keshav. Folks, this verse does not appear in Gita at all. What I'm saying is, there are 73 verses which is called as Amrutadhara, showers of Amrut, showers of nectar, divine nectar of principle of life, where the whole story is told. 19 verses of the 12th chapter, because if you remember, the first verse was the question by Arjuna. Evam satata yuktaye bhakta swam paryupasate ye chapyaksharam vyaktam tesham ke yoga vittama. Once Sri Krishna was asked the question, is who is better? Akshara, those who follow Akshara, or Yoga Vittama? Both. Who are considered more perfect? Those devotees who worship you and are thus always united with you in love, or those who worship the eternal and indestructible, invisible Akshara? There was a question that was asked at the beginning of the 12th chapter. Starting with that, the next 19 verses of the 12th chapter, entire 34 verses of the 13th chapter, which we're discussing, and the 20 verses, the first 20 verses of the 14th chapter, these 73 verses are considered the Amrutadhara. And the verse I'm referring to is added after Sauti had finished his work. You'll say, who is Sauti you're talking about? Prasanna, you will remember we've been talking about it for the last 40 years, 50 years. See, there are 3 authors of Gita. The original author is Vyasa, brilliant scholar, able to collate the knowledge and wisdom from all the Vedas and Upanishads. His student was pretty bright, but was not as imaginative, was Vaishampayan. He added few more verses to Gita. But the most brilliant student of Vyasa was Sauti, who was able to add quite a few verses in each of the chapter and included the Bhakti Yoga, the central portion, by him. So he was the true inspiration behind it. So the solid foundation was laid down by Vyasa. So this particular story is Sauti's, except it became so confusing for the people who were trying to overwhelm this Amritdhara that even Shankaracharya himself did not have this verse in his notes. Subsequently, later, it was added by some of the scholars, and that is where the first verse of the 13th chapter says. It goes, Prakritim Purusham Chaiva, Kshetram Kshetrajnameva cha, Etat Veditum Ichchami, Jnanam Nyayam cha Keshava. Hey, Shri Krishna, I want to know the meaning of Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetrajna, Jnanam, and Nyayam. Don't get confused. Don't worry about it. Try to make it as simple as I can. Anything that falls within the field of one's of experience is Kshetra. That means this body, Arjuna, is Kshetra. This or human body is Kshetra. He says, Idam Shariram Kaunteya, Kshetram iti abhidhiyate. So this body is Kshetra. So out of the 6 words that I've talked about, I'll take out 2 of them. Kshetra is equal to Prakriti, which is the external part, body made up of Panchavahabhuta, Prithvi, Apa, Teja, Vayu, Akash. That means space, air, fire, water, earth. All of these are nothing but the elements of Kshetra, Prakriti. When we talk about body is Kshetra, then Mano Buddhi Chitta Ahankaranam, that means the mind, the intellect, the Chitta, and the Ahankara, the ego, that also becomes the same part of Kshetra, Prakriti. So out of the 6 words, we talk about Kshetra and Prakriti is that. That is destructive. Now, Kshetrajna is, I can give an example that Shankaracharya gave. He considered that as a glowing lamp with 5 holes. What you have is Brahman inside, the awareness, the consciousness, the bright light of Brahman, the God, what do you want to call it? But it looks as though it's coming through 5 different openings. It looks as if like there are 5 different lights. But basically, those 5 beams of light are the 5 organs of perception, which basically eyes, ears, nose, nostril, taste, and touch of the skin. So these are the holes. So Chaitanya, awareness of Brahman lies in that body. Only as long as that consciousness, awareness is present, you're able to sense those things. You can see, you can hear, you can taste, you can touch. So what I've done so far is Kshetrajna is same as Purusha, and that is to be known. So I took out 3 more out of the 6. I took the first 2. Kshetra was Prakriti, took it out last time. Kshetrajna is equal to Nyayam, to be known. That is Purusha, that is Brahman. So these are 5. And the only thing that is left now is what is Jnana. And Jnana is the one that we're going to discuss starting today. So we talked about Brahman, Purush, and the Kshetrajna are the same, or the Chaitanya, if you want to call it, which is Anadi and Ananta. And Kshetra and Prakriti is the same. And I think, John, you were discussing last time And you were a little confused talking about Maya. And if I'm not fully understood what your confusion was, Maya exists there. This creation exists, but only reason it is called false or transient, because it is transient. Because it is not permanent, because it is not Bhuta, Vartaman, and in the future, not present in the past, present in the present, present in the future. That's the only reason it's called Maya. Yes, we are there. Yes, we are able to experience it. But since that aspect is not permanent, it's considered Maya. Okay? The one which is permanent is the truth, Satya, and that's the Brahman. So that finally brings us to the discussion for this morning, and that is Jnana, the values for living. So he talks about 20 values in this section, which is absence of pride, unpretentiousness, non-injury, accommodation, straightforwardness, service to teacher, purity, steadfastness. I can keep on going, but obviously I cannot discuss more than one or two this morning. But the key will be for all of us to join in the question answer session. One other thing I would like to touch this morning is amanitvam. What is mani? I love Sanskrit. Manaha asya asti iti mani. The one who has excessive self-respect is mani. So he goes to such an extent. There's nothing wrong in having pride up in what you do, but when it extends, that self-esteem extends all the way up to conceit or haughtiness, that becomes manitvam. The mana does not imply that the individual is without qualifications, that man or a woman. But whatever the qualifications there one has, loom much larger in that person's mind. So he wants respect and regard from others. There's nothing wrong feeling good about what you did, no. But if you feel so great about yourself, that demand respect from others, then you are mani. So absence of not simple pride in what you do, but extending to the level of self-conceit is mani. In Marathi, we call garva. Self-exaggerated understanding about oneself is garva, that's manitvam. The key is, with your good actions, you can command respect, but you cannot demand respect. I mean, it happened in the olden times, and professors in the audience will realize that it doesn't happen anymore. When my father walked in the room, I suddenly got up, and even when I had finished my medical school and went home, he would come back from downstairs from his dispensary, and I would be upstairs reading, but I would still stand up as soon as he came. That's a part of respect for your parents. And in the olden times, when the teacher walked in the class, the students got up and respected him. But things have come a long way, so I won't comment much about it. Prasanna can comment at the very end. But again, you can command the respect, but you cannot demand the respect. As a matter of fact, manitva sometimes comes because the individual has a self-doubt, because he himself is not sure whether what he did was good or not, or respectful or not, should be something worth being respected. So when he is not quite sure, that's sometimes is the way of expressing that hopefully people will recognize it sometimes worthwhile that I've done. So he wants to see his actions to be appreciated and seen by other people in a glorified light. That means basically he has inflated ego and wants other people to appreciate it and give him reverence for that. One important statement, manitva is never ever justified by accomplishment. What am I talking about? We think that things were done by you, because that is totally wrong, because we were not the only individuals involved in that success. There are so many people, so many other factors which were involved in that ultimate success. The people who helped us on the way, the teachers, the mentors, parents, co-workers, and last but not the least, the God's grace. Because sometimes the help comes from a place where you don't expect, comes from the people help, from the people that you know, and some people who do not know. So for one to say that you accomplished this is being ignorant. It means, my word, simple word, is stupid. So one must have humility that the things got done through you, but there are so many people equally involved in that process. As a matter of fact, if you remember the 10th chapter, Shri Krishna is talking about Vibhuti Yoga. All good and successful that you see is the manifestation of divinity. He says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarva pravartate. 8 verse 10 chapter. So everything that you see as successful is only because of me. So he continues, Ashwatta sarva vikshanam, devarshinam cha narada, gandharvanam chitrarata, siddhanam kapilo muni. So he takes out the best in each of the field, and he says that's divinity. So these skills, the wisdom, all the things that people, we can see in the wonderful people, these are the gifts given by God. And if they have some understanding and sense of humility to really appreciate that they were given the gift from God and doesn't get to their head. So anytime you do it, when you appreciate it in a grateful way, saying that idam no mama, this is not mine, this is nothing but divine. So one has to happy and grateful that things get done through you, and be thankful for that, and never get to your head, become mani. The second thing I was thinking about joining was Adam Bitvam. Is basically declaring one's glories. The worst part about it is that many people don't even accomplish it, but show off as if they have accomplished it. They create for something that they have not done themselves. I remember talking about our temple building. Everybody takes credit when something successful happens. I'll stop at this particular time because it's a big subject I opened up today, and I'll take comments and questions. I would love to hear from all of you. Thank you, guys.
One thing that struck me when you were talking about money, there is nothing wrong for a person to expect some amount of respect, acknowledgement for what he has done. If he doesn't get it, it merely tells me that he's very insecure about himself. If you're very insecure, if you're secure, you really don't care whether other people appreciate what you did. It would be nice if they appreciate what you did. But as you said, you cannot command it. You cannot demand it. You cannot. Unfortunately, I cannot think of anybody in the political sphere who is a mani.
Once you talk about politics, it's oxymorons. So.
Yeah. but it is true. I'll give you an example of an elderly man who had given a lot of money to a Department of Electrical Engineering for student scholarships. And he never craved for recognition. He just gave the money because he felt that he owed the students something, because he came from a poor background, made himself, and became very rich. So one time he came to a recognition luncheon, and there was one student, a young student, and he said, but for your scholarship, I would not have been able to complete my studies. I would have taken a job in the summer and disrupt my studies and so on. When he heard that, you could hear him sob. He was really touched by it. At the end of the meeting, he took the checkbook out, wrote another check for $10,000, and said, "Please put it in the scholarship fund."
Yeah.
So in this situation, the person was an Amani. He never demanded anything, but even he was deeply touched by the recognition that was given by the recipient, and that to me is a greatness of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but he never craved for it. He never asked for it.
No, exactly. I remember you telling me the story, talking about Dambi story, but one person said that I know the president.
Yep.
And he said, but does the president know you?
That's right.
Remember?
That's right.
The other story that Swami Dayananda told me was one guy was out for about 3-4 days, and the guy says, "Where were you all this time?" Oh, then he wanted to show off how great he was. Oh, the minister wanted me to talk about the what do you call taxes and local regional information. So I was with him, and he stopped saying that as soon as his wife walked in that room, because wife knew that he had gone to help her brother move from one place to another. That's what Swami Dayananda told me. So he was recreating himself some big shot. He was doing something special, but in fact he was lying, literally. Dambi.
There's Dambi, yeah.
But
the interesting thing is, this value, you have to constantly keep reminding yourself, and it is easy to assimilate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not difficult.
I think that's why you need people who can straighten you out. The real friends are one who are honestly tell you that you need to shape up.
Yeah.
That's why to be in the company of good people, you automatically shape up.
Yeah.
What do you have, Naina?
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to tell you that this particular lecture is just packed full of information and whatever, so much background, etc., that I think I'm going to have to, when Arun puts it on the web, I think I'm going to have to talk about learning it over and over and over. Some of us students, it doesn't stick the first or 2 times. Anyway, the question that I have, you know, when you went through, I mean, you have a lot of values to cover, but you started with this mani and haughtiness and excessive self-esteem, etc. Well, I want to know, I mean, it must be very, very difficult to keep yourself humble, because even some of our great gurus, you know, were very tapat, you know, the word tapat, and haughty and just, I mean, demanded respect, even though they deserved respect, but you cannot demand it, as you say. So it sounds like they were this close to enlightenment, but they still fell short of that. They were throwing shop after shop all over the place, as my grandmother used to tell us stories. So how do you reconcile that? So,
well, I think the fact is, when they do that, you have to recognize that everyone has periodic lapses in their judgment. So you have to accept it and move on. And the thing is, when I was younger, I was saying that there were a lot of good teachers and some of them were not so good teachers. And I would get mad in my mind, why can't this guy be a good teacher? But as I grew older and my gray hair appeared, I came to realize that that guy was also teaching me what not to be. You see what I mean? So to me, everybody is a teacher if you just keep the eyes and ears and open mind, most importantly. So, you know, when Durvas came and gave all those sharp you're talking about, he himself was not himself comfortable with his under his skin. It's basically that manifestation of incompleteness on the part. You may have book knowledge, a lot of wisdom, but the education is not completed as yet. And that's why, as I mentioned to Prasanna at the very beginning, it is so very important to stay in the company of good people. Every once in a while, everyone slips through that. You need refinement over and over again. Like the stones in Narmada River, they keep on hitting each other and keep themselves smooth and clean by being in the company of good people. So, and then we need CME, I told you, right? Continuing medical education. So
Yeah.
that's the only way to remain on top. So,
Thank you.
Johnny had something to say.
Well, yes, as usual, I have a question. And that is the role of the guru. Towards the beginning of your lecture, you emphasized the role and you said that the guru is a requirement for self-knowledge. But is there not also a tradition of spontaneous awakening? And if you step outside of Hindu tradition, there are paths, for example, the Quakers. The fundamental teaching of Quakers is there is that of God in every person. To me, that sounds identical to the concept of Brahman and Atman. But in Quakerism, there are no designated teachers of any kind. There is only meditation and listening for the inner voice. And so I have, for years and years, wondered about the degree to which a guru is actually required.
Good question. The point is, if you have a living person who's observing you closely, one is able to find out the areas one can improve and reach that goal faster. If you try to expect yourself to do that, maybe you can, but I'd rather have a coach. The coach is a person who is enlightened himself, not somebody who's a false coach where he just wears this apron, I call it, that's correct, dress, and expects you to get a lot of money. But as I mentioned to you, is Shankaracharya said, Durlabham Toyame Vedat Deva Anugraha Hetukam. Only comes through the grace of God. Manushyatvam, Mumukshutvam, Mahapurusha Samsaya. So you got to get God's grace to be born as a human being. Even if you're born as a human being, very few people, as 6th chapter talks in Gita, very few of the Manushyanam Kochit, Shikuna said. Only an individual feels that he wants to be released from the bondage of that birth death, bondage of not being happy with what I am. Want to be something different than what I am. I'm too fat, I'm so thin, I'm so white, so I'm green. So want something different than what you are, that mumukshutva. And the third is to be in the company of enlightened who can help you and guide you. So you do not find that teacher yourself. The teacher seeks you out. For example, an artist goes out on a drive and sees and tells his friends, pick up that big piece of rock. I want to have it in my garage. And then the friends called 6 months later. He said, hey, what did you do with that stone we brought inside? He said, come inside. It's inside the house. He had created a beautiful masterpiece of Sri Krishna, which was one of his prayer pieces in his altar. So he was able to see the Sri Krishna in that piece of rock, which other people could not see. So that's what we call scouting in the baseball field or scouting various sports, where they can see the quality of an individual that they can see is there, but you cannot manifest itself fully. Then some small chips have been taken away. So you need coaching. So trust me, there's no question about you needing a living person. And Even though stories such as Sadashiva Samarambha, starting with Lord himself, we need somebody who's living. You cannot read the books, okay? You need somebody who can tell you how to correct. But everybody has different style, but this is my understanding. But I feel comfortable with it.
Well, to me, there is no question whatsoever about the value of a teacher. My question went to the necessity. Is there any other way? And I asked it in part because the particular meditation path that Yvonne and I have been on since 1979 does acknowledge spontaneous awakening. Rare, but it happens. And then with respect to Quaker meditation, there are no teachers. My first experience with Quakerism was when I was in high school, and I was taken to a Quaker meeting for worship by two of the teachers, just on their own initiative. And I knew nothing about it, absolutely nothing. And we walked into the meditation space, and when it came to be the correct time, somebody who was designated to be the leader for the day started, just made it clear that now it's time for meditation. And that was that. Nothing else. Nothing else. No teacher, no singing, no decorations, no rituals, nothing, and no explanation of what meditation is apart from being quiet and listening in the best way you can to your own inner voice.
My only comment was that I think we need teachers is because it really is a shortcut, right? So we can acquire more knowledge from their experience, and it helps us for our enlightenment.
I think this is very helpful. I think the thing that really caught my attention was be happy with yourself, as you mentioned. You want to be tall, short, white, gray, whatever. I think that being happy with yourself. And the other part of it is be in the company of people, like-minded people, and who are enlightened.
It'll come to when we discuss this topic further, is as I talked about Kshetra and Kshetrajna briefly. Kshetrajna is the awareness or consciousness that is present in each and every one of us. Okay? Or Chaitanya, want to call it. And that Chaitanya is continuous. It is the same in every people, every individual. So when if your mother is no longer there in the mortal form that you remember, just like Kumar is not there, the Chaitanya is all together. So when you think about that teaching of hers or that shloka, that awareness within is rejuggled to connect with the general awareness which continues with you knowingly or unknowingly still there. So you will find that when you have that enlightenment through the Guru, your mind becomes sharper. You're able to understand the same thing that you read before in a much clearer sense. Just like you're cleaning your glasses and you're able to see much better. You see what I mean?